Masechet Moed Katan Daf Yod. Our basic principle is that on Chol Moed, one may not do work of exertion, and also one may not do professional work. So if someone is an artisan, or this example here, if someone is a tailor, they may not do professional tailoring. But if someone is doing it just in a non-professional manner, then it's permitted. So that is the halacha in the Mishnah. A layperson can go ahead and sew in the way that he knows how to do. What is the definition of someone who is a layperson when it comes to sewing? Anyone who does not know how to pull a full needle of stitches through the fabric at the same time. A professional would know how to do that. Layperson can't. Or another definition, anyone who cannot make a straight hem on the bottom of their shirt or their pants, they'll make a hem that would be thick so that it wouldn't wear out. And lay people don't know how to make it straight. Professionals know how to make it straight. So if you're not a professional, then you can do that on Chol Moed because it's just you need it for the Moed. It's not professional work. It's not hard work. Now, if you are a professional, you are allowed to do some things, but you have to do it in a unusual way. So machliv, the Oman is allowed to do that. My machliv, what does that mean? He can skip and make a temporary stitch that skips the number of normal stitches. It's called machliv because it's like the teeth of a dog that are uneven, and so those stitches will be uneven. Mesarigin et hamitot. And then we saw a machloket. The Tanna Kama says you are allowed to interweave cords for a bed. Their beds would have a frame, and on that frame they would have cords that go across both ways, crisscross. And on top of that, they would have a mattress. So the Tanna Kama says it's permitted. You can do that. The Rebbe says no, you cannot put the cords on, but if they're loose, you can tighten them so that you can sleep on them better. So we want to understand exactly what this means. My misargin, my mematechin. What does it mean interweave, and what does it mean to tighten? When Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said, "Listen, Eretz Yisrael, there are two Amoraim who disagree regarding this definition. Even though both of them learned it from the same teachers. One says that misargin, the one that Tanna Kama says you can do, means doing it crosswise and lengthwise, putting them both ways, make it nice and strong. And nevertheless, it's permitted. It's a lot of work, but something that you're going to use on Chol Moed. Whereas Rabbi Yosef says, no, you can't do both ways. You could do one way. That's sufficient. You can still get a good night's sleep. It won't sag too much. And that way you're doing less work. That's all you're allowed to do. That's all one opinion. The other opinion takes everything one notch lower and actually more stringent, and says, according to Tanna Kama, you can only do it one way, but not the other. And Matachin says only if it was loose, then you can tighten it, but you can't even put it one way to begin with. Okay, so Ini, now we're going to have a challenge to that. Both of these opinions, the Tanna Kama and the Rabbi Yosef, agree that you cannot braid cords to make cords for the bed. Right? You want to braid them in the first place. Now, according to the one who was more lenient and said, according to the Tanna Kama, you can put it both ways. So, and then matachin would mean only one way. And it makes sense that Rav Tachlifa would have to teach us that everyone agrees, even the one who says you can put it both lengthwise and crosswise, still says you can't make the cords and from new. So then I would have to say that because I might think that you could. But the other opinion that's more stringent anyway, according to that opinion, even the most lenient says you can only put it one way and not the other. And matachin is even less, even more stringent, that if it's loose, you can tighten it, but you can't put them on. If I can't even put the chords both ways, and for sure I can't make the chords in the first place, right? Because that really is a good challenge to the lean to the more stringent, the second opinion. Okay, Amar le Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Rabbi Chia bar Avin, Hika leman dama mesagin sheti belo erev, and now a further challenge, even though we didn't even answer that one, we're going to challenge that opinion even more. Is there anyone who says that? Tanan, Rabbi Meir Omer, Hamitash mi sheisrok ba shelosha batim. We have a Mishnah Masechet Kelim, and over there we're talking about when does something become ritually impure? When it becomes a kli, when it becomes a usable vessel. When does a bed frame actually become a bed? It's when you put mishe yisrog. It says the word that we're trying to define here, misargin, mishe yisrog, 3 batim, you interweave 3 rows lengthwise and widthwise. So even if it's only 3, that's already considered a bed. What you see here is that the word masrig means both ways. And so therefore, that's a pretty good proof for the lenient interpretation that you're only that you're even allowed to make it both ways, according to Tanakama, who is actually we see here to be Meir. Ela ki ata Rabin Amar. So rather, you know what? That tradition that we got from Eretz Israel, we have another tradition about that tradition. That one, the one that we've been discussing until now, was from Rav Dimi. He was one of the Nechut Ta'eh. But another one, a colleague of his, was Ravin. He also came from Eretz Yisrael and Bavel. And when he came, he explained the machloket in Eretz Yisrael in a completely different way that would not have the challenges that we just had before. Which is, you see the challenges of learning something in one country when you don't have perfect communication with the other country. You have to rely on the messengers, and it's only good as that. But the great thing is that, through their knowledge of all these mishnayot and baraitot and their ingenuity, they can actually figure out logically. Says, no, that something that with that tradition is off. And then so Ravin came and explained it better. The word misargin, everyone agrees that means going both ways, and that's permitted according to Tanakama and not Rabbi Yosef. And everyone agrees. All the Amoraim agree that that's the definition. Finish. They only argue on the definition of matachin, whatever Rabbi Yosef says you're allowed to do. So one of those, Amoraim in Rabbi Yochanan, says that you can do it one way, but not the other way. And the other one says, according to Rabbi Yosef, if it has to be on already, you can tighten it, but you can't put it on in the first place. All right, but we still have more questions, even according to this definition. So you can interweave both ways, and for sure you could do mimatachin, whatever that is. Going to be meir. You can only do one, but not the other. There's a third opinion that says you can't do miticha at all. So it's interesting that there's a third opinion. If you say that mimatachin means putting one way, only crosswise, then it makes sense that there will be another opinion that will be even more stringent and say, don't even do that. But if you say, if the more stringent interpretation that you can't put it on, you can only tighten it, would there be a Yesh Omrim that says you can't even tighten it? Right? That seems to be an extremely severe opinion. Would anybody say that? And the answer is in. Yes, even though you're not doing much, it's not really a lot of work, but you have another solution. You can put clothing in that depression in the bed, and you can sleep there just fine for those few days. And then after the holiday, you have a more permanent solution. So since it's not such a problem, yes, there was a Yesh Omrim that you cannot even have that solution. All right, and that's all we have for a bed. And now we're going to get to ovens and millstones. Ma'amidin tanur v'chiraim v'rechaim b'moed. One is allowed to set up an oven, a stove, and a mill on Chol HaMoed. These are things that take a significant amount of exertion to build. but they are also all items that you actually use on the Moed for cooking. For that's the oven and the stove and the mill to prepare the flour. Rabbi Yehuda adds a stringency that you can't chisel a millstone for the first time on Chol Hamoed. It doesn't have to be prepared. What you can do is take the top and put it on and build it, but you can't chisel it. Now we're going to define what kind of chiseling happens in a millstone. One opinion is to cut grooves in the millstone. So in between the two stones, you need grooves so that the grain will go in there and get stuck in the grooves, and then they will be smashed. And sometimes the grooves, after using it a long time, they get smoothed out. You have to put new grooves. So that's what it means. Rav Yechiel Amar bat Aina, whereas Rav Yechiel says, no, it means cutting an eye hole, a hole in the middle. That's actually where you would put the raw grain inside and then start turning it around, and when whatever's in there would move to the sides and get cut. And so it's talking about cutting a hole in there. That's what the chiseling means when the Yehuda says that's what you can't do. All right, so now we have two opinions, and again, we're going to ask a question about them. Braita says that you can set up oven and stone as long as you don't fully complete the labor. Don't do a full job, just do enough that you need to. Chachamim say, do the whole thing. You want to cook well. Rabbi Yehuda says, in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, that you can build a new one and you can cut a groove in an old one. Veyesh a millstone. And there's another opinion that says you can't chisel it at all. Okay, so now we're going to focus on the new and old in this Braita. If you say that chiseling means cutting grooves, well, that can happen in an old millstone because over time the grooves get smooth and you have to re-chisel it. So that opinion makes sense. But according to the one that you're cutting a hole in the middle to put the grain in, so then why would an old millstone need a new hole, right? It already has a hole, otherwise it wouldn't have been usable in the first place. And there's a challenge to that opinion. But we have an answer. Maybe you have to make it a little bigger, right? And because we want to put more in there. And so that might happen even with an old one. Rav Huna once heard someone who was cutting a groove into his millstone, chiseling it on Chol Hamoed. Amar man hai, who is this? His body should be desecrated because he's desecrating Chol Hamoed. Okay, very stringent. He was in fact stringent because he followed the Yeshomrim that you said I can't do it at all. Not an old one, not a new one. So that's why he was stringent. Or he was stringent, but the rest of the daf is going to be a whole series of statements of leniencies, most of them. Rav Chama said you can make a groove in a millstone on Chol Hamoed. It's okay. So we do have a stringency here that if you have a horse or a donkey that you ride on, and so you need to trim the hooves so that it can ride, and you're using on Chol Hamoed, that's permitted because you need it. But if the donkey that you use to pull a millstone, right? They need some horsepower, donkey power to pull it. That you cannot trim its hoofs because how much grain do you need on Chol Hamoed? Not so much for the whole holiday, and even without it can perform that task even if you don't trim it. So this is a stringency to limit. Try not to do that much work if it's not necessary. Okay, although we have that opinion, nevertheless, Rav Yehuda, Rav Yehuda permitted one to trim the hooves of a donkey to turn the mill. He said you can set up a millstone. You can build it, build the base of it. And you can make a water channel to push the mill, a hydraulic powered mill. And you can build a stable for the horses to use to pull the mill. So in other words, everything's allowed, the whole series. All right, and now the rest of the stuff is going to be statements of Rava, all leniencies. Rava shera besaduke susial mivne akarpita ulmivne itzteba. Rava says you can groom the horse, build a trough, and build a bench on Chol HaMoed. That's totally fine. All for the use of the animal to pull the mill. So everything's allowed. Rava said you can do bloodletting on the animal. They believe bloodletting was medically beneficial for humans and for animals too. You can do that on Chol HaMoed so that the donkey that's pulling the mill will be healthy. אמר לה אביי, תניא דמסייע לך, מקיזין את דם דבהמה, ואין מונעין רפואה לבהמה בחול השמועד. And Abaye, his colleague, who always argues with him, today, he said, I have a baraita that supports you. And yes, you can do bloodletting for your animal, and you don't prevent any medical treatment from the animal on Chol HaMoed. In general, for general use, for riding, for whatever, including for this, for pulling a mill. Rava shira lechas Rava also permitted scrubbing garments as part of to get stains out, even though generally you can't do laundry. That's a lay person's way of doing laundry, right? Just scrubbing a little, that's okay. But if you're going to tie sleeves and make pleats, that's prohibited. That's professional laundry. So that goes back to the principle we started with today, that you can do something in a lay person's way, but not a professional way. But Rava continues, someone who's clearing the ground, you're making the ground straight, it depends. If you're doing it for a threshing floor, that's permitted because you want to thresh on Chol HaMoed because you're intending to eat it, so that's useful. But if it's because you want to prepare the ground for planting, that's prohibited because, right, what you're going to plant now is not going to grow for a long time. So there's no point in doing all that work for Chol HaMoed. That's not going to be a benefit of Chol HaMoed. Okay, so Hechidami, how could you tell the difference between someone who's making the ground straight for one purpose or the other? If you see someone taking a mound of dirt, putting on top of him another mound, or digging one furrow and putting it into another furrow. In other words, he's not making the whole field straight. He's only making one area. Then you know that person is making a threshing floor, because threshing floor, you just need one area to be straight. You can do that threshing, and that's it. But if he takes from the mound and puts it into the furrow, that means he's doing it for the whole field, and he's making the whole thing straight because he wants to plant. That is too much work and inappropriate for Chol HaMoed. Someone who clears his field of twigs. It depends why he's doing it. If he wants the twigs, he wants to use them for burning or firewood, it's permitted. But if he wants to clear the field so he can plant on it, then it's prohibited. For the field itself, it's not allowed. How could you tell the difference? If he only takes the big branches, that means he wants to take those to use for building material or to burn wood. That's okay. But if he's taking the big twigs and the small twigs, what use is there for the small twigs? Then you know that his intention is to clear the ground for planting, and that is not appropriate for Chol HaMoed. Someone who opens a water channel, an irrigation a channel onto his land, it depends also. What's his intention? If his intention is opening it to catch fish that are inside, then it's okay. You can have the fish and they'll eat them and enjoy the holiday. But if he wants to water the ground, that's prohibited. Okay, well, we talked about in the first Mishnah when and where, what kinds of fields you are allowed to water or not. So this would be a case where it would be prohibited. Echidami, how could you tell the difference? If he opens two gates, one for the water coming in and the other one for the water going out, then he wants the fish, right? He's going to wait for the fish to come through and catch them. But if he only opens one and all the water is staying in the field, then obviously he cares more about watering the field and less about the fish. Someone who cuts branches of his palm tree, if his intention is feeding the animals, that's okay. But if he wants to cut them so that's for the date palm, so that the date palm will grow better, kind of pruning it, then it's prohibited. How could you tell the difference? If he takes all the branches just from one side, then he just wants the branches so he can feed them to the animal. If he takes from both sides, then he's doing it for the enhancement of the health of the date palm itself. You have unripe dates. If you cut them into pieces so that they'll be fit for eating and they'll ripen quickly, that's permitted. But if you want to preserve them for after the holiday, that's prohibited. Right? So again, the principle, you can do something that you're going to enjoy on Chol Moed, and not do work to prepare after Chol Moed is not allowed. However, there's an exception, a leniency. However, if when you leave them, they're going to get all infested with worms, then you're allowed to preserve them, because it's like merchandise. Merchandise in general, we're going to see, is not allowed. You're not allowed to do commerce and buy and sell. But if it's davar ha'aved, if you're going to lose out on the profit, on the principle, then you're allowed to do it. And here is, if you let it go, the dates will be totally ruined. So in that case, it would be permitted. And that vein, pirak matya kol shehu asur. Any business, any commerce is prohibited on Chol Moed. But if it's going to cause significant loss to the principle itself, it's permitted. Ravina, we're going to have two stories here. One time, Ravina had a business, and he could have sold it. He got an offer for 6,000 dinar, but it was Chol Moed, so he didn't take it. And sure enough, that was a good idea. Not only did he fulfill the halacha well and enjoy his Chol Moed, turns out that the stock went up and he was able to sell it for 12,000 dinar afterwards. Had he sold it on Chol Moed, he would have lost out on that profit. Ravina once lent money to the people that lived in this fortress of Shanbata, and he wanted to collect the debt. And so he went to Rav Ashi, can I go today during Chol Moed? Since now they are there, and on another day, they're not going to be there. They travel all over. You're not going to be able to pin them down. Then you won't be able to collect your debt. So you know what? This is like a merchandise that will be lost, a significant loss, and therefore it's permitted. So it's interesting. We have these two stories back to back. One where perhaps you could have argued it would have been allowed because the stock might have gone down, and so maybe that he would have lost his principle, but he didn't. He kept the law, and it went up, and so it was even better. But another case where you could say, well, I don't know, find them some other way, and nevertheless, Rav Ashi permitted it. So you see that these are very subtle definitions, and every case has to be analyzed for itself. This principle that we just said, ki haigavna, we have it also applies to avodah zarah, because we learn holchin leyarid shel goyim. You can go to a fair of non-Jews. ולוקחים בהמה ועבדים ושחוט בתים וסעודות וכרמים וחוטב מעלה בערכאות שלהן מפני שהוא כמסיר מידן. They have a fair and they involved in it, so all kind maybe pagan rituals, But there's good sales at this fair. So you're allowed to go there and buy animals and slaves and maid servants and houses and fields and vineyards. And you can even go to the non-Jewish courts to certify these sales. If you don't go to the non-Jewish courts, then they could always come and say, "Oh, I didn't really sell it to you. I didn't mean it." So you go to their courts and they certify it, and that way you won't lose lose the sale. No returns. And the reason all this is allowed because masil biyadan miyadan. It's like you're rescuing the property from their hands. This is a good deal. You won't be able to find it afterwards. So even though, yeah, you have to go and be involved in using these non-Jewish courts, we like to use a bet din better, and you have to go to the fair, where that might involve some aspect of course, doing idolatry, but they might be associated in some way. All that, nevertheless, is permitted because of this principle of davar haved, something that will be lost. And so this is a good source for what if something is on sale during Chol HaMoed, and the sale will not continue afterwards, and you won't be able to ever buy it again. Is that considered substantial loss? And so perhaps yes, according to this. Rav Shera Lechia Bar Asher Migdal O Hare Bechula Demoadad. Rav permitted Lechia to weave a simple trap to catch an animal. My tamam, I say jotu because it's a layman's way. Aval izle asur, but this complex trap made out of nets is not allowed. My tamam, I say oman, because that's an expert way of doing it. And lastly, Rav Yehuda Shera le'ami tanura le'migdal tanure. So Rav Yehuda said that Ami can, the one who makes ovens, he can make ovens on Chol HaMoed. Okay. Ulaba bar ashabi lemigdal mohalata. And to this other person to make sieves. Oh, both needed for cooking. Ini, hold on, is that true? How could he do that? Another sage said that you are not allowed. Braita says you are not allowed to make ovens. It's a lot of work to make an oven, and therefore you can't make a new one on Chol HaMoed. La kasha, and we say there's no contradiction. Kan bimota hama, kan bimota geshamim. In the summer when it's hot and dry, and the oven will dry out quickly, and you can even use it on Chol HaMoed. So the summer, that would make sense, like for I guess Pesach is more in the summertime. So Chol HaMoed Pesach, and you can use it right away. But in the times of when the rainy season, well, maybe depending on where you are, where you live, if it's raining, like on Sukkot, if it's already raining, then you're going to make the oven, and it's going to be raining and going to ruin it, and so you won't be able to build it there then. And so this is another example of that principle that you cannot do a lot of physical exertion if it's not going to, especially if it's not going to benefit you on Chol HaMoed itself. And so through these series of statements and stories, we get a good idea of the appropriate Chol HaMoed is Chol, so you can do a lot of things, but nevertheless, it should follow all of these principles that we've listed in this stuff. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.